Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Q&A session that rounds up this week of the NFEF Female Filmmakers Showcase. My name is Onge Demeko, and I am the Partnerships and Distribution Manager at the NFEF, and I will be facilitating this conversation this afternoon. I'd just like to welcome all of the female filmmakers who are joining us on the call. Um, all the female filmmakers and the like who were involved in this project. So, ladies, welcome. Hi to all of you.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for availing yourselves after what I can imagine has been quite an interesting journey for you guys. For those who are watching live on our YouTube page or Facebook page, I'd just like to give them some context. So, this female filmmaker showcase is essentially an initiative driven by the NFEF together with our partners, the DTI, the KZN Film Commission, and also the Gauteng Film Commission and the SABC. And the idea behind this entire showcase was to really do something impactful and tangible when it came to supporting um, women who form quite an important part in the sector when it comes to previously disadvantaged individuals, especially when it comes to the film and television and audiovisual sector. So this initiative was a collaborative one, and the importance of it being collaborative was really just to hone in on the idea that women are a force for change and a force for economic growth. So that is also something that really inspired us to seek those specific partners that we sought. So in terms of the showcase, how it happened was, or really how it played out was essentially a showcase where we would fund 10 female filmmakers over a period of 10 weeks in order to produce some short films. These short films have been showcased on the NFEF's YouTube site for about a week now, from the 23rd up until today. And they have also been showcased and really channeled through the SABC as our broadcast partner. And tonight, for those of you who are anywhere near the Walter Sisulu Botanical Gardens, there will be an exciting drive-in where you can drive in at a specific ticket price and watch some of those films as a drive-in cinema experience, which is something quite different and very COVID-esque. So all protocol would be observed, and we hope you come there jabbed and safe and ready to engage and watch film in a very safe way. I think I'd just like to welcome everyone who is joining us on the call this afternoon. And I just really want to start off by getting line of sight of how this experience was for you guys, being involved in this experience, having to produce and be creative and execute in such a short period of time. You know, a lot of people think just because it's a short film and it's not necessarily something that's, an hour and a half to 2 hours, that the effort or the work is less. But if anyone wants to take the floor, Lisa, I'll start with you. How was this experience for you?
I always describe it to people as like a huge stepping stone. I'm so incredibly grateful for the doors it's opened for me, the skills it's equipped me with, and the fact that I got to do it along with these women. When they all popped up on the screen now, I actually felt quite emotional because we haven't seen each other in like 2 years in person now, and we went through so much together, sitting up at like 1 a.m. during the course, and just like discussing story and ideas and how we can navigate story and shape it and how we can make it happen. So yeah, it was a huge stepping stone, and there was so much mentorship involved, which was invaluable, and it was really empowering, having people believe in you and support you and be like, you can do this, like we believe in your story and the stories that you have to tell. So yeah, incredibly grateful for the opportunity, and it certainly has been something that's opened up many more doors in the film industry for me and for many women as well.
You picked up on quite an interesting theme of mentorship. And I think, when it comes to women in most sectors, and film is no different, unfortunately, it really becomes difficult to learn the things that catapult you forward. When it comes to the type of story that you chose, can you just take us through the film that you produced, the name of it for some of those who haven't seen it, and why you chose that story? And I'm going to link that back to the mentorship idea because sometimes it makes it easier, especially in film, when you are trying to tell a story that is relatable to as many people as possible.
My story is called 12, and it's a story of two young 12-year-olds growing up, having a early post-apartheid upbringing in a small town in South Africa. And I think I have a passion for small town stories. It's ones that we don't always get to see on screen. Usually it's set in like Joburg or Cape Town or Durban. But I mean, in between all of that in South Africa, there's like a vast landscape and vast towns with so many important and interesting cinematic stories to be told. And also just observing the experiences of a young woman in the early 2000s and what you had to navigate in a country that was still very much turbulent and having a lot of healing that needed to take place, and change that didn't always reach the small towns or the corners of our country, and what that experience was like as a child, observing the differences and how some families adapted and some households not. Yeah, so that's what my story is about.
Amazing. Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the ideas of adaptation because I think as women, especially in film and the sector, the concept of adaptation is very difficult. You almost have to adapt to an environment that is not built for you and that does not welcome you. So it becomes very difficult around something like Women's Month when the celebration is around you being a woman, but it doesn't mean that the challenges that you face as a woman and the barriers that come to unlocking adaptation are no longer there, right? So Portia, I would just like to throw the question forward to you. How are you, Portia?
I'm good, thank you. Very well. Thank you for having us.
For joining. Lisa picked up on quite two important themes when it comes to kind of, I think, supporting women in the sector. And she picked up on the idea of mentorship, and through the line of sight of her chosen story, the idea of adaptation and the challenges thereof. Um, in your experience during this project and even in the industry as a whole, how has mentorship really helped you? And has it been something that you deliberately sought, or has it really just been as a result of you observing?
I think it's something that I did when I started out. I really tried to source some mentorship, especially from other women in the industry, in your films, because like you're saying, sets are really quite hectic for us. And it's almost like we must work 10 times harder than what a guy would do, which is pretty much unfair. But that's, that's how it happens. And I think this for us was also quite emotional because together it's not something that we are used to in the industry. And I think we should practice it even more. So to see each other again and the fact that we have a WhatsApp group and we support each other, even outside of the showcase, was really, really something special, which you don't necessarily find a lot of in the industry at large. So for me, it was quite a special experience because I don't really get a lot of support from females, which I think is something, we must all really improve on. Um, I think the female on female support really needs to be restructured and thought about. I think there's a huge problem there, which is quite sad. Um, whereas, the support for the guys is massive. So we don't really know where that comes from. But I think, like I said, initiatives like this really, really are special because, it's unheard of. Just 10 girls trying to, put together a couple of movies and form bonds and form friendships. So it was really, really quite special. And I think the more we have them, we can lessen, the lack of supports that we don't have in the industry.
Absolutely. And take us through your film and your chosen film and the chosen story behind that, and why you chose that.
The name of the film is called Ukolile. Um, it was so weird because actually the story is not related to me. So when my family watched it, they were like, "Are you trying to tell us something?" And I'm like, "No, guys, not everything has to be, about the writer, but it's about basically a mother and a daughter relationship that is very explicit and has gone very wrong, where a daughter comes back to sort of save the mom from alcoholism and drugs and poverty, but the mom is pretty much okay with her life. And through that, she realizes that actually I am the one that needs to separate myself from this. Changing her will just make me even more toxic. And I think the reason why I chose it is really based on sort of the females around me, especially in varsity, when we all used to go home in December, when you hear some friends saying they can't go home because the moms are addicts or the mom and them don't get along. And also based on what would happen, because, we always have the father daughter relationship. And I think if that's broken, the mother can sort of step in, and fix it. But what happens when the mother relationship to the daughter is broken? What does that mean? And I think based on people who share their stories of mothers that actually sell them out to men, or you use them for money. And I sort of really wanted to tell that story of sometimes we got to be the change. We can't change our parents. We have to kind of take that leap to change. Yeah, so I just wanted to tell a story of what would happen if a mother and daughter did not have a good relationship, and what would you do to fix it? Yeah. So there's sort of the thought behind it.
That's brilliant. I mean, I love the mother-daughter exchange. And I, when I was watching it, and obviously I saw that it was yours, I, I could almost feel I could almost feel you through the story. And it's ironic that everyone in your personal circle was like, "Do you have something to tell us? Do you have personal issues?" But
Yeah,
for
I
me,
was so worried.
it goes to show how when you develop and are given the opportunities enough in this industry to kind of create your own ID, when it comes to your unique way of storytelling, no matter what the story is about, it'll always shine through. So I think it's that's why it's even more important to have as many initiatives as this as possible. It even imprints the necessity and the importance of this process and this project, because we will only really create that environment for as many women in film as possible if we have, as many opportunities as possible, where you will just be able to, similarly to how someone can look at a film and say, that's James Cameron, that's Spielberg. We really need that type of thing where we say, that's a Portia Hlubi, that's very Portia Hlubi-esque, or that's very, Lisa Kun-esque. We really need to get to that process, because I don't think we are there yet. Anyway, certainly not in South Africa, I don't think. Even globally, I think it's very few females who you can really attach a personal identity to a film or to a story or to just the way in which it shines through. Um, and and yeah, so I mean, I think in you um, indicating that you were separate from it. Your energy and your vision and your personal idea in terms of storytelling definitely came through. And I'd like to kind
Yeah.
of extend this to. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to add that I think also what helped us, I don't know if the other ladies will agree, is I think the mentors we had also didn't try and change us. So that's also very important, is that they mentored us in terms of the writing process and the directing process, in terms of what do you want to say. And I think because they encouraged us to say what we wanted to say and then mentor us in shaping that into a film, really helped showcase our signatures in the film. Whereas sometimes when you don't have a voice and you're just writing, then it doesn't come through. I think the mentorship in this program was really, really cool, and that's in that way.
So much. I mean, Miss, I see you nodding. Are you in agreement with that?
So did you say Tsecho?
I said Mish, sorry, but Tsoho,
Oh,
you can.
Mish, should I go ahead or will you?
You can go ahead. Sorry, I got cut
Oh,
off. I missed that a bit.
sure, no problem. No, for sure. I mean, I agree definitely with the the sentiment with the mentorship. It was extremely helpful, and I think for me personally, that's what I took away from this experience, was being able to right, develop a story, begin it and go through the entire process, having a mentor to guide me and to bounce ideas off as the story takes shape, with the genre and the characters and the world. And definitely for the directing as well, because we had Lazi, and she just had a whole scope of films that she sort of showed to us that we were able to borrow from, if you will, and be inspired by. So yeah, no, for sure, I definitely agree with the mentorship sentiment that's been expressed.
How many mentors did you have on your project specifically? And I think as you're answering that, kind of take people through your project and the inspiration behind the story.
Okay, cool. So we had a writing mentor as well as a directing mentor. And my project is Tabazimbi, which is a supernatural short film. It's set in Tabazimbi, which is just outside of Rustenburg. And I went with that location, I didn't really shoot there, but I went with that location in the story and the title because it's got quite an ominous feel. And the ominous feel extends itself to the narrative, the characters, and Mule is the protagonist and what she goes through in having had a stillborn baby, and in her mind not being able to come to terms with the baby being stillborn, and therefore her mother-in-law and her husband playing along with the fact that the baby is still alive and giving her a doll to make her believe that it is. And she only finds out later that the mother-in-law actually had something to do with the deceased baby's spirit and is still using the deceased baby's spirit to sort of harness some sort of powers materially. And that's how the story begins and develops. And
It was heavy, supernatural, but it was heavy. I think often when people think supernatural, they're like, oh, it's in the clouds, it's wishy-washy. But
sure.
Always in when a film is kind of boxed as such or presented or packaged as such, I mean, the underlying message that's trying to be told is always universal in some way or the other,
Yes,
right? It's
absolutely.
just the way in which it's packaged. It's a bit more expressive, creative, whatever word you want to tune to that. But the message is underlying, and it's usually done for the type of messaging that's quite heavy, just so that it's digestible, right?
Yes.
Mish, I'd like to just go back to you because I think your guys' films are obviously not the same, but the conversations around fertility, I think there's a common thread there. If you kind of just want to take us through the film that you did and the choice behind that type of a story.
Yes, sure. So my film is called Fruitful Emission, and it's about a woman who longs to have a child. And when she tries to get pregnant conceive a child with her husband, she actually finds out that her husband is the one that is infertile and it's not her. And he led her to believe that she was the problem this whole entire time. So yeah, it is a universal theme. And specifically when I was writing the story, it came from an honest place. Not that it was my own life experience, no, but to create a Muslim character, a female Muslim character. I've been an actress for like 12 years now, and I was thinking I've never auditioned for a Muslim character of my age ever, and I'm like, that is so crazy. How could people not be writing Islamic characters? And that's what inspired me to write Fruitful Emission and create the character of Iman, because I wanted some sort of representation of the people of my community in cinema.
And how is that process for you? Because as you're saying, if it's something that you'd never auditioned for, it means that, it's probably not the type of story that's being, written all the time. How was that? Did it make the process more difficult given the time frame that you had, or in terms of just gathering the types of personal experience insights that you could leverage the story off?
Well, I've always been writing. I've always been writing stories. And I actually had applied before, I think like maybe 2 years before, to the NFEF and the KZN Film Commission with this exact same story. And it wasn't picked up. They didn't feel like it was good enough. And I kept on working on it and applying every year. And I was like flabbergasted when I got chosen, or I got shortlisted for the filmmakers slate. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. It feels like my dreams are coming true. It's actually happening. I was so excited. And yeah, that was it. And then I still continue to write Islamic stories or characters um, of the Islamic faith.
Yes, I mean, I think divine timing is a key thing that you mentioned there. And, perhaps if it were picked up 2 years ago when you applied, it just would not have had the type of impact or opened up the types of conversations that can potentially come from it.
Absolutely. And you know what? Like all the other ladies said, having those mentors there helped a lot. We were exposed to, I think, probably two of the best script editors in the country, and we were so incredibly lucky to learn from them. And that changed our stories, that changed the way we write, how we look at our scripts, how we develop our scripts in such a huge way. So I feel so lucky and so grateful to have them in our lives. And I know with Ayanda and Tracy, we all have our numbers. If we're stuck with anything, if we need any information, we can just text them, ask them to read our scripts. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And they're so open and so loving and so willing to give us feedback, even though we're not in the program anymore.
Boipelo, I think, can you come in here, kind of let us know what your film is and the inspiration behind the story? I think you're on mute. Boipelo, you're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me now? Hi. Hello.
Hi, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for having me. Okay, fine. So the inspiration behind my story. Back in high school, I dropped math and picked another subject. So basically, my dad was just so livid. He couldn't believe it.
I was about to ask, did your parents want to kill you?
Well, yeah,
They think you were gonna.
he didn't
They
talk to
think
me
you were
for
gonna
like a
end up
week.
a failure without a job, not being able to pay your debit orders.
Exactly. The fact that I had dropped math just made him go crazy. I mean, he did what, electrical engineering, and he was a lecturer, a science lecturer at some college. Um, so I think I disappointed him quite a lot by dropping math back in high school. So basically, because I was like, oh, you know what? It's not like I was not good at math, no, but I felt that I wasn't great at it either. And I was like, ah, you know what? Besides, I'm not gonna use math anyway in my life. I want to be a filmmaker. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's sort of like the inspiration, because that's the storyline for Imran is basically my kind of storyline. You know what I mean? So I rebelled against that. I rebelled against my dad. And that's where the inspiration for the film called My Business comes from. Basically, Imran is a 23-year-old guy, and he wants to be a fashion designer, but he's torn between pleasing the father, because the father actually wants him to be um, a business owner. In fact, he wants to live his legacy, pass on the legacy to his son, because the father is actually a business owner. So he's so conflicted, but in the end, he chooses to actually follow his dreams. That's what my business is about, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head at the beginning when you said, I was good at maths, but it's not like I was great at it. And I think for a lot of people, the opportunity to do so many things, right, always presents itself, right? I'm an actress, I'm a presenter, I'm a writer, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a this, I'm a slashy, right? And no offense to anybody who is. But I think it takes a certain type of courage to really hone in on one thing, to say, just because I can do something, it doesn't mean I must, right? Why can I not actually follow and pursue the things that I am really, 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 really not even good at, but really, really, really passionate about? And I think even outside of film, I think men really have the type of comfortable environments to make them just pursue and focus in on certain disciplines and make the most out of them, even if they're not like the most intellectual and whatever. It's just the opportunity and the privilege, rather, of being able to focus on one specific thing. And it is a privilege because some people obviously need to do a lot of things just to keep the bills. But I think it's privileged in the sense that the environment and the world enables them to really just stick to one discipline. And Sacha, I'd like to come back to you on this because similar to Boipelo's story, I mean, I can tell you now as a black female in this industry, I think my parents are shocked that I'm not like destitute and things actually worked out in one way or the other, right? So I mean, I think how did that conversation go for you and your family and lead up to who you've become now in this industry?
Yo, that's such a loaded question because similar to Boipelo, I also quit maths in high school and I did typing instead. And my parents were like, what are you gonna do? Like you need maths. And I work predominantly as a writer, but I always knew that I wanted to get into the film and TV industry. But I started off at the SABC as a commissioning editor, and my father had passed away at the time, but my mother had no idea what that was. I would explain it to her, but she wouldn't get it. It was only when she saw the credits at the end of
To
Isidingo
see your
one
name.
day that it actually matters. Like, oh, my child's name is on the credits. And it only started sinking in when I left SABC and I had then gone to ETV, and I left ETV to fulfill a career as a freelancer and a freelance writer. So I currently write for Scheme Sum. I am a writer. When the story opens and the first opening credits you see is Tshegomo Neisa, right? And it's so explanatory. She finally got it that, oh, okay, leaving maths in high school, this was what it was for in the long run. But our parents don't necessarily understand, especially when we're artists, because they're so used to, conventional industries and conventional careers, because they didn't really grow up with many choices, and the choices that they were exposed to were the very conventional sort of careers that they could follow. But for me, that's what makes it more exciting, is because I'm a mom, and my kid gets to see me do something that I'm absolutely passionate about and that I absolutely love. And hopefully my passion for what I do and my love for what I do will inspire him to go off and do, whatever he wants to do, even if it is conventional. That's okay. But hopefully that's going to open up more options to him as he grows up.
And in terms of the film that you were a part of, tell us a bit more about that.
Tabazimbi.
Oh, sorry, you did. Sorry,
I did. I'm like, what
you did at
again?
the beginning. Oh my gosh, how could I? It's the supernatural element. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So, something you said was quite important to me. The idea of choosing the path of writing. I mean, look, to be a writer on Scheme Sum is nothing small, right? One of the highest reviews showed in the country. Right, to say that you've become a success would be quite of an understatement. But I like the thing that you mentioned with regards to the storytelling and you being a mother, because I do feel that the power of film is really how it really can be a vehicle for so many things and for so
Mhm.
many industries,
Yeah.
especially now that so many industries are in the process of recovery, right? And how film can really be a vehicle to tell the stories that are not being told often enough and the stories
Mhm.
that have never been told.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, as a writer, right?
Yeah.
As someone who dropped maths for typing, who does that, right? How
Yeah.
important do you think writing is now in terms of really crystallizing an experience, right? So Mish was saying earlier how she'd never auditioned for a Muslim character of her age, right? There
Yeah.
probably are so many stories that people have and experiences that people are sitting within their minds, and even in their conversations that they have privately, but do not necessarily have the means or think they don't to really crystallize it in a format that is well written. And when I mean well written, I mean easily understandable, right? And for so many other audiences to digest and experience and indulge in. So, I mean, how important do you think screenwriting is, or script writing, or in the process of filmmaking and storytelling as a whole, right? If you consider the entire value chain.
Yeah. It's the bedrock for me because I mean, without the script or the story or even the concept, you really don't have much of anything. The director can't direct, the producer can't produce, there's no crew. What are they going to shoot, you know? So, I mean, for me, storytelling, particularly in the format of script writing, has always been so crucial because for me, the narratives that we tell and the narratives that we show on TV or film or social media or whatever platform we utilize are crucial for representation, for identity, for a sense of belonging, for whatever sense of yourself in the world you need to feel. You really can get that from the storytelling, and that's all embedded within the story and the concept that you come up with. And it's not lost on me that you're from the NVF. And I really want to shout out the NVF as well, because I know that you guys have the three tiers, tier one, two, and three, when you have your funding cycles. And the funding cycles for me are so crucial, and the tiers are even more crucial because then you can come in with an outline, even of what your story is about, your short film or your web series is about. And because we always want to tell stories that are reflective of us as a people, that really is an opportunity for people to use if they wanna, if they're emerging producers, for example, or emerging writers, to use to tell their stories that engage them on whatever issues they are grappling with. You know, issues of LGBTQI, issues of belonging, and like I said, and acceptance, whatever the case might be. So for me, it really, really is important. And you spoke about privilege earlier on when you spoke about something like the male gaze. And it is a privilege to be able to sort of walk into a room and own it and be confident because that's been handed to you. You don't necessarily have to earn it. And so, with forums like the NVF that empower writers, emerging writers particularly, I would actually encourage everybody to, look up opportunities, be it a bursary or whatever the case might be, to help them harness that skill, to be able to crack that window open and then like run through the door, because those stories are so crucial.
Um, and Portia, I would like to come to you because Tsaro just spoke about how crucial certain stories are, and it makes me think of just how crucial the industry of filmmaking is. One of our partners on this is the Department of Trade and Industry. And I think for people who are not necessarily in the know, their perception is that they would not necessarily fund or invest in anything that was outside of your typical idea of what trade and industry entails, right? So, in other words, film, arts, the creative sector. How important do you think? Okay, let me actually pose it this way. Why do you think there is such a lack of importance, I would say, or lack of perceived credibility when it comes to the arts sector?
Um, I think, oh, I think first of all, there's the perception that what we do in TV land is a hobby, right? And I feel like sometimes it also starts with us, the practitioners in the industry. and the way we carry ourselves in terms of what we do, right? And I think because the arts is so close to your musicians, your music, your entertainment, the lines get blurred, you know. So in LA, rock star mentality, like, you know, especially when you do your commercial mainstream reality shows, you know, it's like, oh, it's a hobby. Like there's no sort of structure, storytelling, which there should be, which there is. But nobody really is like, oh, let's shoot and whatever. With film, I do think it's a bit different. There is some kind of seriosity that comes with it. There is some kind of language, some terms. So I think that is why maybe you know, the importance is placed on film because film really travels. But then not a lot of people also are in the film spaces. And I think when Lutejo speaks about the fundings and all these things, it's great that outside of film, there are other things that actually can be funded. So I think it starts with us that are in the industry to change the perception of why it's not taken seriously. And also, it's just, I think what I always ask myself is, why would you not support fund something that is watched by 3 million people every night? You know, it doesn't make sense to me. But I guess for me, it's just, I think, yeah, I think people treat it like a hobby, like Sajala with celebrities, and you know, and so therefore, when you're saying please fund my reality show, it's like, no, like who does that? But yet the funders are watching, so give us the money for what you consume. So it's so weird how there's also a separation from what we consume to what we put money to, right? So people will watch all these stories, but they won't fund them. It's weird. And then, you know, so I mean, I think now breaking into the film space was also quite different because also how people now treat me because I have a short film is very different, which is so weird.
What do they
So
take you more
it's like,
seriously now that you're not necessarily
yeah.
only
And I don't think
reality
that's
TV?
fair. I don't think that's fair because before it's like, oh, you do trash TV? And I'm like, yeah, I do some good trash, you know? And, you know, they call it
So
trash
people
TV
don't see it
because
as different disciplines. In other words,
two completely, you know, different things. But it's not because at the end of the day, we're all still trying to tell a story. It's just that the other one is executed differently. Because on a reality show, you could have somebody who was having supernatural dreams and they have to go see somebody, or on a reality show, I don't get along with my mother. We just put it in a film and we compacted it, you know? So for me, it's just the perceptions of how even the way people treat me now is a bit different. So you can imagine on the level of funding, you know, how people just the lack of importance. And I think it's just the blurred lines of showbiz, entertainment versus arts. And I think the more we take it seriously, will change how people receive proposals and stuff like that.
Mish, did you have a similar experience just in your personal surroundings coming from a Muslim background that also kind of has traditional, well, typically rather, has traditional notions of what you should be, a doctor, this or that, right?
Yes, for sure. I actually did 1 year of law before I studied drama and performance. But my parents could tell that I was so depressed and unhappy. So they let me change my degree to drama and performance. But even then, too, being a Muslim actress was incredibly hard. And half of my family is Muslim, and my grandparents were extremely embarrassed that I was out there, you know, showing my shoulders, showing my boobs in commercials and like being like the sexy person or like the girl next door. They were like, what is happening? You're showing your hair, you're showing too much skin. And they did feel embarrassed. Like, I'll never forget there was this one incident where my granny had like, I was on a cover of a magazine or something, and then she had guests come over, and then she took it and she hid it away so no one could see it. And I was like, oh, okay, but yeah. And then she always used to say to me like, I just pray that you leave acting. Like I pray every day that you leave acting and you become a director. So I think eventually her prayers were answered because that's what I do now. But yeah, the transition from being an actress to director was also very, very hard. The people just don't take you seriously. They're like, oh, she's just an actress and what does she know about film? What does she know about writing? And then when I say, no, I know a lot, actually, I sat and I helped develop Kandasamis, like the basic storyboarding of Kandasamis. Like that just didn't come from nothing. I was writing about my family and my culture and my community. Like I know what I'm talking about. I've been there, and my 12 years on set. Yes, I was in front of the camera, but it's not like I wasn't learning. It's not like I wasn't paying attention to what was happening around me. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I know what I'm doing. But that's always like the hard thing, is trying to convince people that I'm good at directing and I'm going to be a good director. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you've been quite deliberate in your career, and I think I mean, eventually, when you're deliberate and intentional, the work speaks for itself. And I think, Lisa, you were also quite deliberate. I mean, I think this entire process, we were quite 10 female filmmakers, 10 weeks, 10. There was, some quite significance around the number 10, but with your story, there was significance around the number 12. I just want to know why you kind of chose that deliberate stance, I guess.
I think it's like it was an interesting age for me because I feel like a lot happens um, in that age group. You're like on the precipice of becoming a teenager, but you're still a child, and you like I want to like a new woman. You're entering a new stage of womanhood, and that can be an overwhelming time on top of all the things that were happening in the early 2000s. So ideally, I mean, we've developed 12 into a series now, but like ideally the big dream would be to do like season 1 12, season 2 14, and season 3 16, and just like going into those age groups and observing and learning and discussing all the things that I think, especially in small towns, weren't discussed in the town itself, and in terms of being a woman, and what you were sort of taught you could talk about and what you couldn't talk about. And yeah, I think it makes for interesting conversations on screen.
I think so too, and I think people from small towns will know and understand that it doesn't necessarily mean that they have small voices, right? And more than anything else, that their stories are universal. It's just that they they don't necessarily have the spotlight cast on them. And I like what you said about the series, and I hope you do pursue it that way, because I think a big thing about any process of this kind is to build, right? Is the development aspect around it. Um, and I think it can start in small phases, such as you women keeping in touch if you have been in touch or if you're engaged. But also, I think just from a development process, kind of not stopping it at this, but building it, not just in terms of funding and creating the same funding for a next cycle or a next period, but the stories themselves, the formats themselves, developing them into something more. Boipelo, have you thought of the different ways in which you want to develop um, the type of film that you were involved in, or is it? Yeah, I mean, have you thought of that development process? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm saying, can you please ask that question again? Sorry, I didn't get it.
So, I mean, Lisa was talking about how she wants to kind of develop her short film into kind of a series. Have you kind of had the same thoughts around the film that you were involved in, not necessarily into a series, or because I mean, I think the story that you shared and rather the inspiration behind it is very like easily understandable by so many people. Have you had thoughts around that?
Oh, definitely. In fact, I actually thought I should try and make this film, my business, into a feature film. Um, I've been trying to actually work on it just to, try and explore other dynamics as far as those themes are concerned. So it's work in progress. Definitely, I'd like to actually make this film into a feature. In fact, turn the short film into a feature.
Brilliant. And I think the biggest thing is the growth. Women in this industry deserve the growth, right? Um, they deserve the deliberate funding, the deliberate attention, but also just the growth and just building on one concept and making it bigger and making it better. And just investing a lot of energy into, or rather not investing a lot of energy, but having the energy that you invested in the initial story grow and flourish into something more. And I think just in terms of the commercialization in this industry, that's where I think we'll really get the bang for our buck. Because, typical Women's Month narratives are that we must be mbogotos and strong women and da 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 da. But I've seen of late, there's Sekgo shaking her head. I've seen of late that women really are tired of being called strong. It's like, we know we're strong. It's okay. It's cool. They're tired of kind of, because there is an expectation that, you can handle anything and you must handle anything. And I think that particularly in the period that we're now, still in the pandemic, but kind of adjusting to it, there is so much opportunity to kind of build on something that already exists, as opposed to having your focus disjointed everywhere. Do you, and this is really for anyone, how do you guys think organizations such as the NFEF and our partners, how do you think we could practically make that happen in terms of building beyond this type of process that we've had now? Do you think it's another cycle of funding? Do you think or do you think we should expand the areas of mentorship when it comes to some of the other projects? How do you think we can improve the process of what we did now?
I'll jump in and just say that I think the process of allowing for development to take place, which, I mean, it's absolutely incredible that the NFEF offers something like development funding, and it's a template that I've taken from the Female Filmmaker Slate and applied to my projects going forward for different writing projects, where I find a development process to take it through, because otherwise often we're forced to put like a first draft on screen, and that's a disservice to our writing, to our directing, and to the work of the crew, who are all phenomenal, if you're just putting a first draft on screen. So the investment in women's stories and in developing them to their fullest potential, I think the continuation of that is essential, and the continuation of calls for female slates, for development, for mentorship, because it also equips you with the vocabulary that you always don't have going into the industry, so that you feel empowered when you walk into a room. You can understand the conversation that's happening around you, and so that you're not exploited or taken advantage of, and so that your story and your IP isn't exploited and taken advantage of. I think it's incredibly essential to be able to have someone to teach you that vocabulary, so that you feel okay and you feel confident going into the room to pitch your story and to make your film.
For me, I love the point you made about vocabulary, Mish.
For me, I think we really need to learn about the whole business of filmmaking and the financial aspects behind it, because for me, I feel like that's where I struggle. I'm a creative at heart, but running a production company or running the film as a business is extremely difficult. When you're applying for funding, you have to send in a budget and a production schedule and all of these things. And I didn't know who to turn to, and you can't really find those answers on Google. So if you have a workshop in place that you can tell us what exactly is needed, how to manage your film like a business, how to make it profitable, how to distribute properly, put us in touch with companies, distribution companies, or the SABC or Netflix or whoever, but just give us those connections so we can sell our films, because at the end of the day, we make these films and they just sit waiting to be picked up by a film festival. And maybe if we're lucky, we could sell it to SABC or Showmax or some sort of platform. But we don't necessarily now have the resources. Well, I don't. I don't have the connections and the resources to just go out there and market my film, sell my film, or even like take it through this whole be a producer and a line producer for my film. I don't have those skills, and that's something I'd love to learn.
That's brilliant. So, I mean, I think you both picked on two important things. When Lisa was talking about the vocabulary that you need to have, especially when you walk into a room, and how people end up taking you more seriously because you just have a certain terminology and lexicon that inspires confidence in you, right? And that comes as a result of what? It comes as a result of what you're saying. It comes as a result of literally and deliberately being put into a position where you are networking with the distributors that you should be networking with. And you are targeting your films at the types of platforms that are uh, better attributable to them in terms of them having no more success, as opposed to just any type of platform that as a consumer of content, right? So I mean, I think it's incredible points that you have, and certainly notes that we are taking, and the types of interventions that we will definitely implement and are in the processes actually of trying to implement. There is one thing though that I would like to. Boipelo, did you want to say something? I see you're not on mute.
No, I'm
Oh,
just in agreement with what you say.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. There's just one more thing I wanted to highlight as well, and I think it goes back to what both of you are saying is the concept of imposter syndrome. I think and um, Mish, with you saying how you really did not have the kind of business acumen to position yourself as a content entrepreneur or film entrepreneur. How has that imposter syndrome really helped you guys through your journey in film, and how did it affect you in this process, if it did? And that's really for anyone. Portia?
Um, I think what the guys are saying, especially the whole language vocab thing. My word, that is so important. I think to teach and mentor for me is more important than just throwing the money at somebody because they wouldn't have the skill to see it. And speaking about the imposter syndrome, it's everybody has a story to tell. Sometimes we just don't know the language. We don't know, I don't know what cell text is. And then you get intimidated by this computer and how you must put this thing together. And then your self-esteem goes down, you lose focus because you're intimidated by language, by all these technology. And at the end of the day, you really, really, really had a great idea. And I think I suffered from it a lot in this program because of this whole thing of I come from reality. What are you doing in film? You don't even know how to write. Like, I've never used Celtex before. They downloaded this thing and I'm like, guys, how does this thing even work? And so my energy was so focused on I don't know the languages of, and if you really track back to what it all when your grandmother was sitting with you as a child telling you stories, she didn't give you a setup. She did give you a turning point. She did give you the climax. That's when, but because we're intimidated, and I think for me, what I really like, we really have to work on that, especially because I work a lot with, DOPs who throw lenses at you. Yeah, you need this 7200, and you knew that at this point, this is the shot that I want. But I communicate very emotionally and not technically, and that has really been a struggle for me in terms of how people receive me. So if maybe I was to go into a mentorship to learn the technical side of things, like Lisa was saying, can you imagine what would that do for my confidence? Because what also hits us is because I don't have the language, I don't have the lingo, then you lose, confidence and you walk away from so many projects, or you don't get to the pitching room because you doubted yourself. I meet so many people every day with great ideas, but because they can't put it in a format that a broadcaster would read, they lose hope, but the idea is there. So yeah, it's really, really important.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge for creatives is not only what that you guys are raising, but also the idea that um, being a creative is not enough, right? So I think there's a difference between not having the vocabulary and the acumen, and those are all things that you can learn. There's a difference between that, and obviously you need the environment to learn that, right? To foster that learning. That's what you're talking about, Portia. But there's a difference between that and thinking that because you are a creative, you are um, inherently um, unable, right? Inherently, you're not enough, that you're insufficient. And, you know, I'd just like to pose a different thought to that, because entrepreneurs around the world in other industries outside of film, even if you can think of the most technical um, industry where, you know, someone is an entrepreneur. Let's talk about Elon Musk and his cars, right, and his robots. You have to be, if you think about it, very creative to pull that off. To pull off what Elon Musk does, you have to be a creative, because the most successful businesses come from people who at some point were creative enough and crazy, in other words, creative enough, right? Obviously, I mean that in the best way possible. But people who were creative enough to think that it could work, right? Steve Jobs, Apple, the Facebooks of the world, the Microsofts. You honestly have to be creative enough to think that at some point in the world, everyone will connect on something called the internet, and that's how everything will function. Because what is the internet? Can you touch it? Where, you know what I mean? Like, where do you buy it? Where do you place it? Is it something that you see? You have to be pretty creative to come up with something like that. So I think every single entrepreneur has to be creative. Otherwise, they don't have a business. So if you are already a creative, you are already at 10 times an advantage than somebody else who has to kind of engineer that creativity. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is there's not so much of a disconnect with what you women already have, as opposed to what some other people have had to really try and drive within themselves to build the businesses and the conglomerates and all of those things that they have. So I think it's just a matter of, like you're saying, the positioning, the opening up of spaces, the opening up of rooms. But the important thing is to never ever think that because you are inherently creative, that you lack, right? Because when you walk into the room and when you finally are equipped with enough of the business skills and the technical skills, there's no telling what you can do. I think that you could also put someone in an opportunity to have all of the vocabulary, all of the business skills, but because of the lack of confidence and faith and the thought that being a creative is not enough to make it in the world, it can be such a stumbling block to success. So I mean, I think it's just a personal note from to you guys to say, don't ever let the fact that you are a creative, inherently a creative, think that it's a disadvantage, because if anything, it is an advantage, because that's how, you know, industries thrive on creativity. And I think especially because of the pandemic, imagine how many industries have had to be more creative than ever. It's just different disciplines, different um, adaptations of creativity, but it's all the same thing. There's a final question that I want to have. Does anyone have any comments to that before I go to the final question?
I think we get lost in that because the industry, there's so many aspects of it. There is what you do to make money, and then there's trying to grow your business. Then there's trying to find money. Like there's so many, and then there's trainings, opportunities that you're looking for, and research that you're doing for other projects. So there's so many moving parts to it. So it's easy to get lost in the sea of busyness, if you will. So I think that perspective is very encouraging, especially because, because of the lockdown, our industry was actually one of the ones that survived and thrived, and so that should show the value that it really has for us in the industry, and to really take what she said to heart and not be discouraged, because we're doing so many things and we don't seem to be seeing results at the pace we would like, if at all, because you do get very discouraged, because being that you're a creative, you're putting a piece of yourself into it. You're putting your, not just your efforts to make or manufacture objects, but it's something that you literally
Personal
create
process.
out of you. Exactly. So it can become quite disheartening. So I really appreciated that encouraging voice of confidence there. So thank you.
I think the last question I have, really, and anyone can respond, is around Women's Month. Um, Obviously, we're having this conversation around Women's Month. We did the showcase from the 23rd up until today, the 27th. Do you guys feel that um, do you feel that in South Africa we are celebrating, we are at a point where we are celebrating Women's Month in the way that we should? Um, I quite personally enjoyed the showcase. I quite enjoyed the process. I quite enjoyed watching all of your films because I just got to see, sorry about that, I just got to see so many different angles and stories and so many perspectives of different human experiences all coming from women, right? Which was different from me than from previous years. Um, and different from, I think, a lot of the content, or yeah, a lot of the content and the focus areas that are around women during Women's Month, right? So it's typically a lot of inspirational stuff, and but for me, I just liked seeing stories being told in a very honest way, in a very digestible way, and in a very educational way. So, do you guys think that we are at the point where we are celebrating Women's Month in the way that we should? And how do you think film can be used as a vehicle to? Because if you guys think we don't, how do you think film can be used as a vehicle so that we do?
With regards to the program that you guys did, absolutely, I think you are on the right track. But when I shook my head with regards to how Women's Month is being celebrated, for me, the one ailment that really, there's many in this country, but the one that needs the most attention is the gender-based violence. Like, it happens at exponential rates, and I always want to liken it to the Black Lives Matter movement, where there was a campaign where, it was the say her name or say his name campaign. We know Sandra Bland, we know the guys, Rob George Floyd, we know all of their names because there's been campaigning and so much emphasis on the police brutality that happens in the States. And women are being killed regardless of the age, regardless of whatever. And for me, it almost seems like it makes the news, or it makes Twitter for a week. There's a hashtag that trends, and then it's done. And we dedicate a month of Women's Month to what? To flowery quotes on social media that mean absolutely nothing when there is blood that is crying from the ground because there's been no justice, and there's been no sort of uh what's the word, like when you reconcile the fact that this thing has happened. There hasn't been any of that. There hasn't been any accountability. The criminal justice system doesn't really support women. The laws and the police stations, and the things that are meant to be in place to support us at this type of level should be there. Because it's one thing to come on here and speak about our careers and speak about how we need mentorship and how we want to grow and do all these things, and that's all great and wonderful on a personal level. But if we can begin to look at what's happening, invariably to all of us, because we are women, just feeling safe is an issue. So I do not think at all that we are celebrating Women's Month in the way that we should be as a country, not necessarily pertaining to the NVF and the films that we make, but as far as the gender-based violence is concerned, we really need to look into that, and at least get some sort of campaign going, similarly to how the Black Lives Matter movement has taken over. those conversations.
I hear you, but in your response as well, you literally mentioned 5 ideas that can be short films, if not feature films. So if you want to play this back later, um, you could have hit the jackpot on 5 content points to focus on. The response of the police. I mean, girl, you went in. So, and that was the point of my question, really. To say, how can we look at the situation that we're in, and channel stories around the reality, right? So that we tell the stories that we all might personally feel, but just have not had maybe the courage or the opportunity to tell. So thank you for that response, because you kind of have indirectly said that these are the stories that can be showcased through film, or these are the conversational points, the critical ones. If I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to kind of share their opinion on that before we close. Okay. So I think we will close at this point. I just want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for, more importantly, being a part of the process, and understanding that it is a process, and highlighting the positive aspects of it, and the gaps, right, that exist in terms of funneling the type of critical and business technical entrepreneurial skills around um, the the story making process and the filmmaking process, such that you are all better equipped next time to package and sell and distribute your stories. Um, Everything that you've said is something that is critically important towards propelling the agenda of women in film forward. And it is the type of feedback that we appreciate a lot, and it's the type of feedback that we will definitely make an effort to tangibly implement. So thank you all for being a part of the process. Thank you for telling your stories in such a beautiful way and unique ways, and more importantly, honestly. Um, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to leave you now to go back to your Fridays. Um, yeah, so thank you on behalf of the NFEF and all of our partners, the Gauteng Film Commission, the KZN Film Commission, the SABC, and the DTI. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.